for joining us. I'm Jessie Van Pelt, the Director of Advancement here at A&H. So if you have questions about membership or our events, I'm your gal. During this A&H conversation this evening, we're going to hear from our very own exhibitions manager, Katie Benson. Katie has served in this role since early 2022 after being promoted from another role at A&H. She has a degree in art history from the University of North Florida. One of Katie's important roles is to keep our art and history collections organized and documented, including the 2,000 works by André Smith that we are entrusted with. André Smith was the extraordinarily talented and individual who founded the Maitland Art Center. Katie's going to share with you some highlights of his life and works. We at A&H are tasked with elevating his place in history and making the hidden gem that he created a lot less hidden. After we hear from Katie, please join us across the street in the gallery for a beverage and a look at our current exhibit, Uncommon Bond, featuring portraits and interviews from our community during our last Wednesday free evening hours. Now help me welcome Katie Benson.
Hello. All right, I'm a little bit nervous, so just bear with me. Okay.
We are too.
Good. It's good to know I'm not alone. All right. Well, thank you, Jessie, for that wonderful introduction. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Can you tell I don't do this very often? All right. Thank you all for coming today as I give you our talk on our founder, Jules André Smith. Originally, this talk was in conjunction with our summer exhibition titled Jules André Smith, The Masterworks, hence the fancy text title I put on the PowerPoint. But in true Florida fashion, a hurricane came through, so of course we had to postpone. But I'm so grateful for the opportunity that we rescheduled because it gave me a chance to reacquaint myself with the realms of Jules André Smith, which I get to share with you all today. And I will say, now, if I was doing a full talk on André Smith, we would be here for a couple days. Oh. So he's a very fascinating, interesting, complex person. There's a lot of details that I will cover today, but some things, I'm not going to be able to cover it all, but I'm going to try. And really this talk, I will attempt to explain where Smith gained his inspirations and what shaped him to be the forward-thinking, boundary-pushing artist that we know him as today. And we're actually going to get started. I love words, I love quotes, so I have two quotes, of course, to share with you all that I think give us a good starting point on what we're going to be exploring today. So this first quote is by André himself. At first, the artist was a realist and painted only what he could see. Later, he became an expressionist and recorded his feelings about what he saw. Today, he is a creator, but still feeling his way toward picturing his inner visions, which at present are distorted by the unbalanced world in which we live. Heavy, right? That's André for you. And then this is by Elton W. Hall. His motto, inscribed in the fabric of the studio, was, "An artist's job is to explore, to announce new visions, and to open new doors." That explains his constant searching and probing within and without himself. He would try anything. His oeuvre is diverse in medium, style, and subject, and that is an understatement. He didn't much care for public opinion, and he was not particularly interested in whether anyone bought his work. He continued working and experimenting almost to his death, which occurred on March 3rd, 1959. So now we've covered his death. Let's cover his life. Okay, Jules André Smith. Ain't he cute? Born in Hong Kong in 1881, Jules André Smith was a savant in art making, mastering the craft in a myriad of mediums. He was a world traveler, a man of deep faith, and an outspoken supporter of modern art. Although known to be reclusive by nature, Smith was deeply affected by the world around him, so much so that a significant part of understanding Smith as an artist is the comprehension of the cultural environments he lived in. As we continue to travel through Smith's story, we'll see just how his world shaped the artist he became. Smith initially grew up wanting to become a full-time artist, but his family did not find such a profession suitable. Mainly, it didn't make a lot of money. It's still kind of a thing today. But what they did find suitable was architecture. So, to go along with his family's encouragement, despite it not being his true gene, Smith enrolled at Cornell University where he earned both his bachelor's and master's degree in architecture. His artistic curiosities were not totally abandoned, however. During his time at Cornell, Smith was very active and designed the cover for the Cornell Alumni News. Oops, oh no, that's the end. I mean, okay, and we're done, thank you. And can you tell I don't do this very often? All right, here we go. And we're off. There he is. Okay. He worked on the publication The Widow, exhibited paintings at Cornell and in New York. He also painted many murals in Cornell University, which unfortunately aren't there anymore. And he taught himself how to etch. Now, if you know about etching, teaching yourself how to etch and being good at it is crazy. I think that's the best way to kind of describe it. It's impressive in itself. And this is an excerpt from Smith's Cornell yearbook, or Cornell University yearbook, yes, where we learned that Jules André's first name was actually Julius. That was new to a lot of us. That gives a little bit more explanation on what he did during his Cornell years. And I always like to point out that they say that he's in the College of Agriculture. Mm-hmm. It was not. It was architecture. I think it would be a very different campus we would have here today if it was agriculture. But see, even those at Cornell make mistakes. It's fine. But after graduating from Cornell, Smith entered into the life of an architect at his own practice, Smith & Ross. However, he still dreamed of spending his days sketching the world around him rather than floor plans. So he dedicated his free time again to etching, which eventually led to the giving up of his professional pursuit of architecture completely. When speaking of this decision, Smith recalled, "It was far pleasanter to etch and to go abroad for new material than to try to build up an architectural practice on a somewhat reluctant foundation." And you can see one of his beautiful etchings of Venice right there. From that point on, Smith traveled extensively throughout Europe, returning annually during the winters through 1911 to 1914, and as Smith's technique improved, he began successfully exhibit his works across the United States, specifically in New York. And what I mean by successfully exhibit is he would put it up in galleries and they would be sold out, which even today is difficult to do. So that kind of shows you the level that he was working on from something that he taught himself. In 1915, Smith submitted 15 etchings to the Panama Pacific International Exposition, say that 10 times fast, where he was awarded the gold medal in etching. Again, I want to emphasize this feat. He submitted 15 etchings along with his really good friend Ernest Roth, who was a profound etcher, had etched for a lot longer than Smith. Smith won gold, Roth won silver. So again, he's surpassing these masters in this field. Smith continued to travel abroad and etch after this illustrious achievement, only halting his travels during World War I, where he served as both a camoufleur and as a war artist. Those two moments in his life also greatly affected his artistic career, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But after the war's end, Smith again sought his leisurely travels. At this time, European cityscapes and landscapes were frequently the inspiration for Smith's artwork, as can be seen in these etchings here. I had a little trouble choosing my favorites, so we're just going to go through a few of them here. But as you can see on the right-hand side, left-hand side, is a Parisian scene. Again, we have a Venetian scene here. This beautiful scene. Can anyone guess where this is from? Paris, yes. It's very Parisian and beautiful. Don't you just want to jump in? Another Moulin, not Moulin Rouge, but another one. And another Spanish scene as well. Now, Smith would also, often base his prints, his etching prints and sketches off of his sketches or paintings that he would do on plein air during his travels. Sometimes multiple sketches would contribute to just one etching plate or print. All right, so now I'm going to ask for some audience participation. We're going to look at a few of these examples. As you can see here, on the left is a gorgeous painting by Smith. On the right, we have the realized etching that was inspired by the painting. What are some similarities or differences that you guys notice? In reverse. It's in reverse? Yeah, it's in a little bit of a different perspective. We actually have a few of these paintings that are similar, and from different perspectives on each time. Again, almost like he was sketching to allow himself to have different viewpoints. Anything else? Color, yeah. What about the mood? Yeah, it's very different. Doomed, yeah. Very Halloween, this, yes. Great, all right. Oh, no, I did it again. Here we go. It's gonna be a long night, everyone. No. I practiced, I swear. No. Okay, we went there. Dun, dun, okay, so here we go. Okay, here's another one. First off, can you guess which is a sketch and which is an etching?
No.
Who thinks that the etching is on the left? Just my mom. Okay, a few of you. Who thinks it's on the right? Mom was wrong. But, again, what are some similarities and differences between these works?
Darkness.
Darkness. You get a much different vibe from this one than you do this one. But what's, I'll give you some of the answers here. What's interesting is it's the same exact viewpoint that we're talking to, even down to the person walking right here. But it's really a different mood, a different scene, a different, more doom, I guess. Maybe André was going through something, yeah. And then lastly, this is one of my favorites.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Oh, you guys like this too, that's great.
Yeah, it does.
Again, what are some similarities or differences you guys see these two?
Definitely can see more details
Mhm.
when it's in color.
True,
See
yeah,
all the details.
yeah.
It's like happy and sad.
Yeah, and I love this because, so this painting, it took us a while to kind of figure out that these were the same. We all knew that we knew that we had this etching, we knew that we had this painting, but at least I had not put it together until we were working on an exhibition, and I said, oh my goodness, these are the same. What is interesting most to me is that the etching has a title, but the painting does not. And I think that, well, now we call the painting what the title is for the etching because I decided so. But, but I think it's telling what the title he chose for. For the etching, it's called The Witch House, which is very, I think an apt name for it. So again, I just wanted to show these differences on what he could do to recreate something he had already sketched, something he had already thought of. He's recreating it into a different mood, a kind of whole different vibe. Thank you. Okay. Now, despite his European travels serving as his main source of inspiration, Smith's endless creativity and passion for pushing artistic boundaries, which he is still best known for today, was also prevalent in his prints, especially during the 1920s and 30s. By this time, Smith produced some more abstract cubist etchings, where he experimented with aquatint, as can be seen. Oh my goodness, we're just gonna be here all night. It's fine. It's fine. I'm so sorry. I'm not even nervous anymore. I'm just making mistakes. It's fine. I feel like I'm making you guys nervous now. Okay. You will. You will. Okay. A scene in Stardust. All right, so this is very different from the works that we've seen so far. I was just telling my intern earlier that I still don't understand why this is called Stardust. It looks more like a very angry face to me. But again, these are very different. You can see that Smith is going in a different direction. And in other works, like Dark Portal, here, shows another sharp turn that Elton W. Hall described quite astutely in his article in Aspects of American Printmaking. He stated, while maintaining a strong architectural theme, the specific architectural detail has been suppressed. The silhouette of the gondola and bridge in the right background identify the setting as a Venetian canal, but whether or not it is based on a particular building is clearly irrelevant to the intent of the artist. He is getting away from the literal rendering of the subject to his subjective perception of it. Now this quote I think aptly explains the shift that we're noticing in Smith's work. Something is clearly changing in his approach to his artwork from realistic to more subjective artwork. Now, what was that? I mentioned before a large part of understanding Smith as an artist is to understand the many artistic movements and global events that he lived through, which would in turn leave lasting impressions on both him and his approach to art. I mentioned before, he only stopped his European travels because of the introduction of World War II in 1914, which he was a camoufleur first and then a war artist second. And I firmly believe that this was a huge impact on him. Camouflage, as we know, was extremely important. It wasn't invented during World War I, but it was extremely important to reevaluate camouflage during World War I. Because as the 20th century unfolded, the technological changes in weaponry, so airplanes, and surveillance placed higher significance on deception and concealment in warfare. Many artists like Smith found their talents valued within Army camouflage units. It wasn't just Smith, you can look on Google. There's tons of artists that were being utilized for their artistic understandings in camouflage specifically. He's there, I swear, he looks very handsome, it's just a little blown out. Although Smith's time in the camouflage unit was relatively brief, he left to go to become a war artist in 1917, right after he enlisted. But the newfound approaches to camouflage, especially those concerning the altering of figure and ground relationships and with mimetic deceptions and concepts of identity, both sparked interest in Smith's and the like of Dada, Surrealists, and especially Cubist artists. Concepts of altering identities in the form of flattening spatial relationships and two-dimensional patterns became the core factors to concealment in modern warfare, as well as Cubism. As can be seen in French camoufleur and artist André Mars. This is his 1915 Cubist sketch of a cannon. So what you see here is he's flattening this plane to distort what our eyes see into two-dimensional patterns. Now, if there was a cannon painted like this, we would probably still be able to tell, what was going on. But Smith discusses these same things when he wrote an article in 1917 titled Notes on Camouflage, and we can see his sketch here. That was nice, guys, good job. Okay, Smith explains in Notes on Camouflage the importance of new developments in camouflage and described it as an art and not the thoughtless application of theory. So again, we have it described as an art form versus a theory. In true Smith fashion, he also accompanied his article with illustrations showing examples of these new camouflage concepts, like this example of a cannon painted with leopard spots. And it says here, an example of camouflage painting leopard spots and overhead screening. The dappled marking on the gun aims merely to distort its form and create in the mind of the observer a doubt as to its military value. In this picture, the huge telltale wheels with their caterpillar treads have been draped with a mottled cloth. The overhead screening is made of leaf netting and tattered canvas. Holes have been cut, and the light showing through them repeats the mottling in the gun and adds to the effect of the confusion. Another one of Smith's examples, shows how the orientation of camp tents to mimic tree clusters from above causes the breaking up of surfaces concealed and the confusion and the deception of the eye of the observer. Again, I'm going to repeat that. The breaking up of surfaces concealed and the confusion and deception of the eye of the observer is also a description of Cubist painting. So again, we're kind of talking about these same themes here. These focuses on figure-ground relationships were especially influential in avant-garde art movements like Cubism, which too focused on confusing the distinction between figure and ground and flattening three-dimensional spatial relationships in two-dimensional patterns. Okay, so we've seen in some of Smith's etchings that he was getting a little wild with his perceptions and approaches to artwork, and he worked in the camouflage unit, which the themes also align with Cubism. Well, how do we know that Smith was influenced directly by that? We are very lucky to have Smith's artwork in our collection, and with that we get paintings like this. Now this is very, very different from the European scenes that we saw in his etchings. Again, very cubist, and this is from 1920. I love this. We have some paintings of the 1930s that are very realistic depictions, but this is from 1920. Again, we can probably associate his time and the camouflage unit, and also just how the art movements were changing during this time period as influences here. Likewise, these concepts were developed further in the art world, and the concepts of mimicry and automatism further inspired the surge of other art movements like surrealism. In 1924, André, again another André, I did not plan this, but apparently all the Andrés were on the same wavelength here. André Breton published the first Surrealist manifesto, and many avant-garde artists began to follow the movement, including Smith. In 1937, after a year of experimenting with automatism and surrealism, Smith published a book titled Art in the Subconscious, which showcased 38 original illustrations by Smith, which were accompanied by poems also written by Smith. So he was also a poet. He wasn't doing enough. Smith also added explanatory essays which detailed his creative process. In them, Smith explains that his approach was in fact in the nature of a challenge to those artists, surrealists, who have claimed to have sat themselves empty-headed and open-minded before an untouched canvas, and has been lifted into a creative urge that resulted in strange shapes and impressive arrangements of shapes and colors. And what he's describing here is basically automatism. So when surrealists kind of first started it in literature, and then would branch out into art, but a surrealist at this time would sit in front of a canvas, clear their mind, and just let their subconscious let them know what they wanted to draw and wanted to paint. And this is what Smith was experimenting with. And I will say, I said before that he started to follow the Surrealist movement. And I'm not sure follow is the correct term. I think he was more interested and intrigued, and wanted to see if these artists were even onto something. So he did his own experimentation. And the result was Art in the Subconscious, which we have 2 paintings to show you today, and I'll read you their poems. So this work is titled, Why Must You Keep Wanting Things? The lofting pinnacles of space, the isolated flower of desire that calls to you in endless chase. Do you not know the stars are with you, the moon is yours, and every day the sun bestows its golden benediction and blesses you for deeds well done. Nice.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Is the background done by him?
It is, yes. So I scanned the cover of Art in the Subconscious, and that is what I put on the back. Good question, good eye. And this one is called, You Always Send Me Gifts on Strings. If you notice, this person perilously hanging from this ladder is giving a gift of a bird to this person on strings. He's going to rip back from them. Strange messages that beat the air with promissory notes on wings that would my heart ensnare. And all the barriers that I raise against your brave insistence melt in 100 different ways to shatter my resistance. Anyone want to take a guess on what that means? I'm just kidding. You don't. S'more, here we go. 4 of Smith's subconscious transcriptions were exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art's 1936 exhibition titled Fantastic Art, Dada, and Surrealism. I think it's also interesting to note that in Paris in 1936, they also had one of their first Surrealist exhibitions, so maybe this was our version. Smith's works were shown in the section of the exhibition titled Artists Independent of the Dada Surrealist Movement, which, albeit is not the most exciting title to be in this kind of exhibition. But Smith's works were shown alongside with the likes of Calder, Walt Disney, and Georgia O'Keeffe. They were also in that section, signifying that Smith's contributions to modern art and its movements were significant enough to showcase besides such contemporaries. It's a pretty big deal. And here is one of his works that was exhibited. And why I have this blurry black and white picture is because we actually don't have any of the works that he exhibited in MoMA in our collection. If you guys have one, let us know. We'd like to see it. Where am I? Okay. Smith continued to explore realms of the avant-garde and surrealism for the remainder of his life. He even continued to paint automatic drawings and branch out into other art movements as he moved into the 1940s and 50s. In 1946, Smith began a series of new paintings, which he just classified under the heading of magic realism. The term magic realism, or I should say the term that André understood as magic realism has other origins in Europe, also in Latin America, and then after that in America. I will say that Smith's version is very closely associated with Alfred H. Barr Jr., who was the director of MoMA during the time that André's works were in MoMA as well, and this was his definition. Barr describes the term as a term applied to the work of painters who by means of an exact realistic technique try to make plausible and convincing their improbable, dreamlike, or fantastic visions. Smith stated that he offered these works not as finished paintings, here's a couple more, but merely as further experiments in his effort to record these visions of the inner eye in contrast with the matter-of-fact outer eye. There's a lot going on in these paintings. Probably should have put them together because it's a lot to unpack. But like Smith's works from Art and the Subconscious, his magic realism paintings exude a free reign of creativity and the explorative nature of pushing boundaries in art. Some of these works, like this one, have become staff favorites and the subject of research and interpretation to figure out their potential meanings. We sometimes. Ooh, thank you, Patrick. I actually did write an article about this if you want to go to our past perspectives. But yeah, so this one, we do a lot of research. I was able to find, we have Smith's sketchbooks, which is so wonderful. And I was able to find his 1946 sketchbooks, which had a lot of these magic realism paintings sketched in it. And next to some sketches for these, there's 3 of these works. We call them the blue works, for lack of a better term. He was basically, he very rarely wrote notes in his sketchbooks, but in this instance he wrote notes that basically was alluding to the concept of dealing with getting older, as you can see here. So we have this woman sitting on the couch here. If you notice the painting of a young girl sitting in front of her, you have these ghosts behind her trailing around. Maybe she's just terrified of getting older. But it's also up to interpretation. You know, we don't have, we have his sketchbooks, we have his scrapbooks, we have, literature and research on him, but sometimes, he didn't write everything down. It's not like Dolly was like, the elephant means this. We kind of have to take it to our own understanding as well. Anyone else has a guess to what it, Patrick?
I think you're great. I thought the same thing, actually.
Okay, good. You are correct. You don't have to take the test. Good job. Okay. Now, as we know, Smith did not limit himself only to surrealist and magic realist creations, just as he did not limit himself to solely studying or practicing architecture or researching camouflage or doing anything. He always pushed these boundaries. Smith instead branched out into many types of artistic themes, especially those which were dear to him. Smith was a man of deep faith, a devout Episcopalian, so much so that he built an open-air chapel on our research studio campus, which is right over there. He also created numerous religious paintings, sculptures, and prints which reflected the significance of faith in his life. During his time as a war artist, so after he's a camoufleur, he joined the expeditionary forces in France and traveled with them, and his job was just to draw and paint what he saw. Kind of sounds great, besides the war. And this is one of those sketches. And as you can see, he not only drew the day-to-day life, but also took depictions with religious themes into it. That's this one. He also experimented with religious themes in conjunction with his surrealist and magic realist works, as can be seen in Flight to Egypt. Now we know that Flight to Egypt was a favorite story for Smith to convey because we've seen a couple of examples of it. Even when we went up to Connecticut to see his Connecticut house, he had a concrete relief design of the flight to Egypt. We have another concrete relief design of it here on our campus too, so this was not new. But what definitely is new is Andre's approach to this particular work. Typically, or historically, this theme is depicted with Mary riding a donkey with Jesus. Joseph is usually somewhere, but not as usually highly highlighted. And that is likewise what we see here. But of course, André added this landscape of hands with stigmata onto it. Perhaps some foreshadowing. Yeah, that Jesus is gonna be a tough friend. Okay. Smith's unique take on depicting religious works can also be examined in this untitled painting titled Mass. Now, this work in particular I find very fascinating. It very much reminds me of our campus. You have the juxtaposition of this Christian or Pope-like figure seated before a room full of Mass that potentially represent other religions or ways of life. And I always like to point out this little smushed skull. Because why even add that? But I love it. Smith certainly brought what he learned from his subconscious transcription experiments to the many different themes and moods of his artistry. His religious works that represent the neighboring town of Eatonville, however, are considered some of his most inspiring. Smith, despite being rather reclusive, was involved in his surrounding community. He became acquainted with the town of Eatonville through his friendship with famed author Zora Neale Hurston, and continued to work with the town until his passing days. Smith created murals, originally for Mount Hope Church in Winter Park, which were later brought to Eatonville's St. Lord's Church, where they still reside today. And these are pictured here. In these murals were scenes of Eatonville citizens worshiping alongside a Christ that was depicted as a black man, or I should say, more of a natural skin color that Jesus probably had. I doubt he was white with blonde hair and blue eyes. Where was I? The theme of Eatonville as a religious setting continues in his more realistic works as well, as we can see here, including this untitled work of a church, of a church service, in Eatonville, and Black Christ here, which we actually believe is a study for the murals that we just saw. So, oh, it worked. Okay. If you look at the center picture here, and then again compare it to our Black Christ here, you can definitely see those similarities. Other works, like this untitled painting, show Smith's understanding of art history and religious symbolism. At first glance, this painting seems as if it's just simply depicting a family hanging out outside their church despite the angels being there. That's a little off. But on closer inspection, one may notice that this is actually a depiction of the adoration of the Magi, or the three wise men, when the three wise men brings their gift to Jesus. Now, when compared to this work here, I'm going to butcher this name, Giorgio Vasari's The Adoration of the Magi from 1566 to 67. The similarities between the two start to show themselves. So for instance, Smith has set Mary and Jesus in the center. Mary is depicted with a pinkish, reddish dress, and Jesus is depicted in blue. This art historically, as you can see here, are art symbols for the Virgin and Christ. And then likewise, you have the three magi or wise men surrounding the Virgin and Jesus, presenting their gifts to them. And you have the angels, of course, which signifies God's blessing on this wonderful occasion too. I will say that André gave Joseph a much better part. Joseph in religious arts really cast to the side, so at least he gave him some center attention. Now, I would be remiss if we did not also mention what I consider to be one of Smith's greatest artistic achievements, the Research Studio campus, which is truly Smith in architectural form. In regards to Smith's inspiration behind the Research Studio architecture, for the longest time we've only had a few quotes of Smith's that basically says, I was not influenced by Mayan and Aztec art, it just came to my subconscious and thus it was, which is a very surrealist concept, as we now know. Another perk that we have is we have André's library And I can tell you that in his library, it's all art historical reference books. We have books on Mayan art and Aztec art, even Mexican modernism, which I feel he was very influenced by too. So we were always kind of like, this doesn't seem like the truth, but it was a direct quote from André, so it was kind of what we had to work with. That is until recently, through the Curtis Institute, we discovered that there are letters between André Smith and Mary Louise Curtis Bach, who is André's dear friend and the main proprietor for our campus here. And in those letters, he fully admits that he was, excuse me, I find the exact quote. He was actually inspired, being deeply impressed by the Aztec carvings he saw in his early school days in New York when he used to go to the Museum of Natural History. He claimed that he spent his time in the basement where these carvings used to be, and in his words, they did something that has stuck and been sort of a subconscious, again, this word subconscious, influence on him. So there it is, we proved him wrong by reading through his letters. This is actually an excerpt from one of his letters. They're beautifully detailed in true Smith fashion. You know, again, the back and forth between Mary Bach and André in these letters was friendship, but also the establishment of this center, what they wanted it to be, what they wanted it to look like. And so Smith would send blueprints, sketches like these of his ideas for the campus, and it's so much fun to look through them and compare and contrast to what was actually realized. These designs you can definitely see all around our campus, although he had a great idea that he calls crazy, that the lights would go through the eyes of this concrete lantern, which I don't think we have, but I wish we did. We'll work on it. And this is another example. It's a little blown out, but this is actually a drawing he put at the header of one of his letters to Mary Bach. And I put this in there not to show you how impressive his letters were, but to also show you that the research studio wasn't just his inspiration behind something he saw in childhood. This was kind of an extension of all that he had learned, all that he had been influenced up until this point. When he came here, he took on yet another art form of concrete. He invented his own concrete recipe, which we still have not been able to figure out. He invented his own tools for this concrete application, and it was later in life that he was doing this, so he never stopped. He even actually designed all of the iron gates were designed by him and sent out to ironsmiths to be done too.
Hey Katie, are these the windows of the Eddie Whistle River?
Oh, maybe. Oh, that's true. Thank you, Hannah, that's true. These do look like yes, these are the windows from the André courtyard. I discovered that before. Yes, thank you. Now, of course, not Mayan and Aztec influences can be seen around campus. There is also Buddhist influences, which may tie into his being born in China. There's also many different influences of different religions and belief systems as well around campus. And then here is a wonderful picture that we've seen before, because I skipped ahead, but it's kind of blurry, but this is André here, and these are the artists that would come here during the artist retreat. So that's what Smith actually built this campus for, was an artist retreat. These artists would come, they would be selected, and they would stay here during the winter months. And again, he did not limit these artists to just come and making art. He demanded from them the same things he demanded of himself. One of the biggest rules that they had when coming in here was you had to work in a medium that you hadn't worked in before. That worked well for some artists, it worked not so great for some artists, and André didn't have a problem with kicking people out either if things didn't go his way. And here's a quote I would just like to end with. I went by fast, didn't I? Okay. Beauty is that mysterious something that a real artist can find anywhere, and that is why he is a real artist. He is a happy scavenger with eyes alert and an open mind who picks up here and there fragments of beauty, which he stores away in the deep freezer of his consciousness, to hold ready for some future use. Art is based on fact, but made in fantasy. It is an outer expression of an inner vision at the storehouse of experience and remembrance. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah?
You piqued my interest in the beginning when you talked about sometimes the sketch was the mirror image of the etching. And the first thing that came to mind is that etchings, you have to do them backwards.
Yes.
Did he ever write about when and why he chose to keep things the same, or because they were like monuments, or I'm just so curious to get in the mind of an artist why they flip them and why they keep them.
Why would you flip it on?
Yeah.
It just kind of depended on what he wanted to approach it. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer. I do know that he was skilled in the reversal, that he could do that just by etching, that he could in his mind reverse the image that he was looking at and be able to accurately draw his rendering on print. We actually have some of his plates where he wrote backwards, and so on the prints it comes up the right way. Now, Ernest Roth, that I talked about before, who was a profound etcher, for example, he couldn't do that. We do know that he used a mirror, that he would use the mirror to be able to flip his pictures over. Yeah. Yes.
What brought Smith to Maitland? I don't know his history.
Yeah, that's a good question. He was a proponent for modern art. He kind of felt that the South was lacking that push of modern art down here. And towards later in his life, instead of wintering overseas and in Europe, he came down here. I believe him and his good friend Duke came down here, I think on their way to Miami originally. But there's a great quote of Smith's, how he talks about how he drove down Packwood Avenue, the brick-lined avenue, and saw the sunset on Lake Sibelia, and he bought the property. It was always kind of his dream to have a place where artists could thrive and live and work without the pressures of outside society. So it just all kind of fortuitously came together. Here. Yes.
Do you know where did they live on campus?
Mhm.
Oh, they did.
Yes, we did. We still have Andre's residence here on campus, which today gets to be used by our Artists in Residence program. We currently have an artist in residence there that gets to stay on campus in his residence and use one of our studios. Any other questions?
How many years did he have this retreat place?
So he started building here in the early 1930s, and he passed away in 1959. So about that time period, yeah.
And was it left the way he finished it, or have there been buildings on this side of the street added to it?
No, he started on this side of the street. They started construction in 1939. They finished in 1942. It was always kind of continuing. André was a tinkerer, so I think even until his last days, he was adding things to the campus. Yeah.
Where's this new addition
Our new addition for our art school.
Yeah.
That is actually going to be, it's not pictured here, but it's just going to be way behind. There's this huge plot of grass just behind us. It's also our property. It used to just be filled with orange trees. And that's where the art school will be going.
So the picture would be up there on that.
It would be like over here. And the great thing about the art school is that we are going to be able to, in turn, bring our campus back to its original intent. So instead of having some of the studios reserved for our art school, we'll be able to have them as artist studios again and kind of bring back the intent of this artist retreat that André originally built.
Katie, what's the favorite thing that you've come across in the collections that was unexpected that you now remember as one of your favorite moments?
It happens every day. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think going to Smith's Connecticut house was really eye-opening. We knew it existed, but just to see the similarities there. He would spend his winter months here, snowbird, and his summer months up in Connecticut. Just his overall tenacity and passion. He didn't stop. He had questions and he experimented and he invented things if he needed to. I find that really inspiring. Yeah.
And he was always funded
He was. That helps. That helps a lot. Yes.
He didn't have a 9 to 5, so.
No. Yes. Mary Louise Gersbach. If you've heard of Bach Tower and Gardens, that's where the name comes from. Well, she gave the name. Yes, she was a big philanthropist. She started the Curtis Institute as well. Big supporter of the arts. Her and André became very, very good friends. And they, in turn, kind of came up with this idea together. So yes, he was always fully funded. Mary and André called this their UG, or ultimate goal. Hannah?
If we wanted to say fund this campus
Mhm.
and help keep it going,
Yeah.
who would we talk to?
We talked to Jessie. She's right there. And if you have any of Andre's art pieces, you talk to me. Thank you.
What about the murals in Eatonville you talked about? Are we able to see those?
They do group tours.
They do group tours.
If you email,
Oh.
if you go to their website, you can email, they have like a general email, and if you ask them about doing a group tour, they'll get back to you.
Where are they?
In St. Lawrence Baptist Church. I've never seen them, so maybe we'll get a group. Did you go and see them?
Speaking of those murals that you had shown us an image of, were the painting of the Black Christ that was featured in the Masterworks exhibition, was that from the same series? Was it a study?
I believe it was a study. Yeah, that's what we believe it was a study of.
We noticed, a neighbor here, we noticed that the Black Christ had blue eyes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I couldn't give it all up.
He couldn't give it all up. It came to his subconscious. So he had to put it down. Yes?
Are the artist workshops around Lake Lily affiliated with the campus?
Some of them are, yes. We still have artist workshops at Lake Lily affiliated with us? Yes, we do.
We do.
I can get you some more information on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a story behind the research studio as a name?
Right.
You know, probably. I'm trying to think. You know, these letters between Mary and André fill over 7 folders, and I've read through them, but you know, you kind of tunnel focus on things. I do believe there was discussion on it. If I'll paraphrase for the best I can do, I believe it was because the concept of research to them was pushing the boundaries of art. So experimenting, again, when Smith was talking about camouflage, it wasn't a science, it was an art form. So he really felt that research was more what you can do to expand your artistry, if that makes sense. I feel that the research studio was what came to me.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. No, his father, I believe, was a seed merchant, for lack of a better term. And then shortly after, they moved to Hamburg, Germany, and then they moved to New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he doesn't.
But I do think it's interesting to point out that, he was born overseas.
Right.
He experienced worldly cultures before kind of coming to the bubble of the United States. And I think that really caused him to be more open-minded.
Right, his influence was totally.
A lot of his approaches to art and to culture was very forward-thinking for the time period that he lived in.
Yeah, I can see that. Right. Thank you, Katie.
And thank you.